With me on today's show is Bryan Caporicci, a very successful wedding photographer and photography mentor from Ontario, Canada. He's won numerous awards for his photography and was one of the youngest photographers in Canada to receive the Craftsman of Photographic Arts from the Professional Photographers of Canada. Not only is he well known for his wedding photography, Bryan also invests a lot of his time mentoring and helping other photographers with their businesses through his website at sproutingphotographer.com, where he publishes insightful business articles and has his own great podcast too. So hi Bryan, I'm super excited to have you on here with us today. I'm sure we've got some great treats and ideas to share with folks about running a successful photography business.
Hey, Nigel, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and a joy to be on this side of, I'd say the camera, but I think it's more the microphone in this case.
It's quite fun to be in the other seat for a change, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I always talk to photographers about the importance of if you want to be a professional photographer, try being photographed, try being the client for once, and it's often a very enlightening experience. And I think the same is true for something like this. I'm so used to being the podcast host and running the podcast that it's nice to, as a treat, to be on the other side of the microphone.
All right, so let's jump straight in. And so today, as I say, we're going to be talking about running a photography business. And so first of all, what does the phrase being a professional photographer mean for you? And how does that influence your approach to business and how you teach other photographers to approach theirs?
I think the really interesting thing about professional photography as sort of a concept or an idea is obviously the lines have been blurred in the last, decade about what professional photographer really means. And I think it's a great question. In my mind, there's sort of two parts of it. One would be the creative excellence in being a professional photographer, meaning that you have to be an artist, you have to be an excellent creator of professional quality imagery. But I would also argue that the second half of the equation in terms of being a professional photographer means that you also have a bit of a business hat that you put on from time to time, sometimes more than others. And I think that's really what makes an amateur photographer who might take great images and might be a great photographer and separates them from being a professional photographer. Because the argument could be made that when you're a professional photographer, it means that you are either making a living or you are making some kind of money or income from the work that you produce for clients. That's how I would start that conversation in terms of what it means to be a professional photographer. And I would just say that as a whole, often photographers get into photography because we love the creative side of it, but we often forget about that business side of it. And I think that's really a big part of the equation in order to be successful in this industry.
And I think the word professional is in there for a reason, as well as not just the making money part. It's the acting like a professional and treating your business with respect and just approaching it with, being serious about it. And it not mean that you can't have fun as a photographer, but I think you have to take your business seriously, make sure that it's properly legalized and that you have all of the, you're paying your taxes properly and that you're pricing your work appropriately and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's so many different influencing factors that can really come in to affect what that word professional means. Like you said, Nigel, things like the infrastructure, like taxing and corporation structures or whatever it is that you're structured with the government, but then even going further in terms of branding and marketing and pricing and selling and customer service and these kinds of things all affect what it means to be a professional photographer.
I think when Facebook first became really popular, for example, you would see professional photographers on there just kind of being almost unprofessional in a sense. They're sort of reacting to negative comments, for example, from their clients and getting all angry and just, in my opinion, not acting in a sort of what you might call a professional manner. And I think, that's another big part of it too, is just being professional about what it is that you do and knowing that you're an ambassador, not just for your business, but for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think really when we look at the bigger picture and say, well, what does it mean to be a professional? I think if we look at other industries, and not by any means to compare ourselves to, dentists or doctors or anything like that, but I mean, those are what we would consider to be professionals, lawyers, dentists, doctors, even teachers to an extent. And if we sort of look at what it means to us to call those people professionals, well, I think that we need to mirror those same kinds of traits.
Absolutely. So a lot of photographers complain about there being too much competition in the marketplace. And, we know that there are, in fact, a lot of photographers around these days. It seems like, they're on every street corner. Wherever you find a Walgreens or a CVS, there's a photographer there somewhere. But what would you say are the main misconceptions about this idea of competition?
Well, I think the idea of competition in and of itself is a bit of a flawed approach to look at business and to look at what we're doing with our clients in our photography studios. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell your listeners that don't pay attention to your competition, because I think that's a flawed model as well. But at the same time, I would argue that if you're truly offering something that is unique, and if you're making your business about who you are and why you do what you do and what it is that you do specifically and what makes you different, well, I would argue to say that there's almost no competition then, because there's only one Bryan Caporicci and there's only one Nigel Merrick. I mean, so if you make your business about something that makes you unique and different, then I would say that competition in a way is kind of a non-issue. And you're going to put the message out there to your clients through your marketing, through your selling, and through your communication that this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what makes me different. If this is what you're looking for, I'm the guy that does it for you. And if it's not, well, then go ahead and look at the competition and you'll find someone that does what you want, them to do for you.
And this idea of setting yourself apart from everybody else, and I ask photographers, well, why should somebody hire you instead of another photographer down the street? What is it that makes you different? And a lot of times they get caught off guard by the question, but then they'll say things like, oh, well, man, I love photography. I have a great eye for it. And I just love cameras and I love working with people. Those are not differentiating factors, really, I don't believe. Those are things that, well, all photographers should be expected to be able to say those things. I mean, who would hire a photographer that hated photography, couldn't stand working with people, and had no passion for what they did? So it's kind of become expected. And you mentioned a 3-word phrase, which was start with why. That was a title of a great book by Simon Sinek, and
exactly,
which I'm sure you've read. And
yep,
he's absolutely right. People don't care about what you do until they know why you do it. How do you go about talking with photographers on that topic and getting them to maybe see something deeper in themselves?
When we're selling ourselves as photographers, because really that's what we're doing when we communicate value, when we communicate what it is that we do to our clients, when we're putting marketing messages together, we're really trying to show them our point of view and convince them that, this is what we do and this is why we do it and this is how we do it. And if you connect with it, well, then go ahead and book me. This is how you can book me. And so when we go ahead and sell ourselves as photographers, we have to have that, for lack of a better word, that hook. We have to have that why. We have to have that unique selling proposition, the USP that you read about in the books and everything. And so it ends up being a reflection of who we are, of what value we bring to the world. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. And a follow-up book that I'd love to recommend to your listeners, Nigel, aside from Simon's Start With Why, would be Sally Hogshead, How the World Sees You. An incredible book, probably one of the most influential books that I've read in years. I had the opportunity to have Sally on my podcast, and we've got free copies of her Fascination Advantage test that you can listen to and take. But basically what it does is it walks you through this process of self-discovery and of figuring out what it is that you offer as a person to the world that they would see of value to you. Because really, we're so used to, when we photograph, a client in a portrait situation, we know that some clients look better from this side, or we know that some clients look better when we get a higher angle. Or if you're a studio photographer, you know how to light, a wider subject or a subject with a large nose. We know how to work these things because we know that everybody has a better side. Well, the same is true for our personalities. Every person has a unique angle, a unique proposition, a unique differentiation that makes them truly special and is a unique identifier to what they can bring to the world that makes them different. And so Sally's test and all of Sally's education in her book, How the World Sees You, it's a great discovery mechanism for really diving into like what that is, what that looks like, how you can apply it, and how you can start to make that a big part of your business. It's the best book that I have read in years. And it was a very clarifying book because it really gives you the language and the ideas and all of the concepts that really put into action and apply these kinds of concepts that we all know and talk about.
It's such an interesting spin on trying to figure out how do people view us? How does the rest of the world see us? And once we can get an idea of that, we can start tapping into some of these like magnetic personality almost, in a sense, to attract the right type of people who would work with us. And going back to the start with why thing, this is not an easy thing for people to come up with, is it?
No. As photographers and as creatives and artists, we're very close to what it is that we do, and it's all very personal to us, because really whenever you create anything, it's got this certain sense of personal attachment to it. And so it's really hard for us to pull ourselves away from that and say, well, this is what makes me great, or this is what makes me different, or this is why I do what I do. But I think when you can be so strict as to look at yourself and your personality and your business and your work and really start to put some language to it and put some ideas to some tangible ideas to what that looks like, I think you can get some real clarity. And then when you start to present that to the world, that's when you start to get clients that are connecting with you and hooking up with you and booking you and buying from you because of what it is that you do, as opposed to just hiring you because you're a photographer and they need pictures taken.
And what I found is that when I've been helping photographers to uncover some of these things, well, almost without exception, the real reasons why they are photographers has nothing to do with photography at all. It doesn't really, you can't really say, oh, this is a photographic thing or a photographic quality that drives them to do it. It satisfies something deeper in themselves. For example, one lady I talked to a while back, after we'd spoken for a while, first she gave me the very superficial answers, I love working with people and women in particular and that kind of thing. And as we dug deeper and she went back to her childhood, she said, well, I was bullied at school because, I wasn't as attractive as the other girls at school and all this kind of thing. And she was quite badly abused by the other kids. And she feels that her photography is a way for her to bring out the very best in other people and show that to the world in a sort of act of defiance against this type of behavior from other people.
Yeah, you touched on it earlier, and I'd love to double back and talk about it again. You talked about when photographers are selling themselves. And again, that's what we're always doing, whether you like it or not. You're selling yourself as a photographer. We often say things like, oh, well, I capture moments, or I love photography, or I've always had a passion, or from when I was a kid, I was always running around with a camera, or I take really nice pictures. And these are the things, and you said it earlier, Nigel, and I'll just repeat it again. Every photographer is that way. I mean, every photographer likes taking pictures. I would think that there's something wrong if we didn't like taking pictures. Every photographer has a passion for it. Every photographer captures nostalgia. I mean, or offers nostalgia. I mean, that's what we do. We take a moment, we take a picture of it, and then give them that moment to enjoy forever. That's what we all do. So if you're communicating those kinds of ideas to your clients and saying that's what you do differently, or that's why they should hire you, that's kind of a flawed approach, because you're really just blending into the crowd, not giving them anything to sink their teeth into. And so I would almost say that as a photographer, as professional photographers, we need to assume that we love what we do and we're great at what we do, and we're going to be nostalgic and give them moments to, live on and remember forever. Now we need to dive a little bit deeper and say, well, what is it specifically that we do differently? Or why do we do it in the way that we do it that would make us more attractive to our clients? Or how do we do it that's perhaps different in a way that our clients would appreciate? And those are the kinds of things that we need to be putting on our website, that we need to be putting in our customer experience, that we need to be communicating through our marketing and in our sales sessions in order for our clients to really connect with specifically what makes us different as a photographer and why they hire us over somebody else.
So what would you describe as the top 3 qualities or character traits of a successful professional photographer?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, to start, without a doubt, we need to be people first. But we need to be likable. We need to have great magnetic personalities. We have to make people feel comfortable and warm when they're in our presence, because ultimately we can be the technically greatest photographer in the world, but if we don't make people feel comfortable, or if we're kind of, a not so nice person and we get together with people and they don't like us, well, we can take technically great pictures of people that don't look like they're happy. And so that certainly falls into it. And I also would say, in that same realm of personality being important in terms of, sales and business and marketing and these kinds of ideas, having a attractive personality is certainly a key benefit in that area as well, because the more we can be likable means the more agreeable we are, the more that we can communicate our message, the more that people want to listen to us, and the better we can sell and the better that we can market our business. And so I would say without a doubt that personality is for sure the first sort of step in terms of traits of what it means to be a photographer. Moving down from there, I would certainly say, and I'll intentionally put the creative merit in here in terms of, a personality trait for a photographer. I think we need to be inherently creative because that's what we do. And if we were, a stiff, boring photographer without any inspiration, without any passion behind our work, well, that would certainly come across to our clients. And so that probably should very much be mentioned in these top three traits. We need to be creatively, free, and we need to be creatively out there. We need to be creatively communicating what it is that we do. So creativity is a huge part of it as well. I would say the third part of it, in terms of the top qualities of a photographer, without necessarily putting some direct words to it, I would say that we need to have a strong foundation in sort of business ideas and in business topics. And again, this is doubling back to what we talked about earlier, Nigel, is that photographers often miss this whole part of the equation. We love the photography, we love the creative side of it, and we forget about the business. And so if we can have that organized, that kind of data-driven, that analytical, that almost attention to detail, if we can bring that out in our photography business and communicating with our clients and in our marketing and in our selling, then we can be that much more successful of a photographer.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people just fall asleep when you say marketing and business. Or, if you want to send a room full of photographers really to sleep, you can say SEO, for example.
Oh, there's an even better one.
That's like cure for insomnia all around the world, that is. But, they have to really, become comfortable and almost in love with the business and marketing aspects of running this whole sort of enterprise. And I think it was Chris Brogan who said, if there's something that you need to do that you're not particularly thrilled about doing, well, you better just suddenly become passionate about it.
No, totally. And that's, Chris Brogan is a brilliant mind. I've had him on my podcast. He's a buddy of mine. And I love what he says in that, in the sense that I would almost add a layer to it, Nigel, because I think for photographers, because there's this totally natural disconnect between creativity and the business thought process, I would say two things. I would agree with Chris in saying that if you don't love business, well, you better, quickly learn to become passionate about it, because it's going to be a big part of being a professional photographer. But I would also say that, hey, if you don't love business, why not consider partnering with someone who does, and that's your photography business? You do the creative side, and the other person can do the business side. There's many examples of successful photography studios in the world today that are run that way, where there's one head that's the creative side and one head that's the analytical business head. And so that's certainly an option as well. If photographers really hate that side of it, well, you can either become passionate about it and learn it, or you can outsource it / partner with someone who does love that side of it and make a successful business that way.
One of my coaching students actually she's the wife part of a husband and wife team, and the husband is the photographer and she's the marketer and business part.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
It's literally a great marriage, because she takes care of that side, leaving him free to focus on being the creative element. Of course, not everyone's going to have that luxury, but I think you're right. Find somebody that you can partner with who understands and enjoys doing that stuff. This is why I joke with a lot of my coaching people. I love to play at the things that you hate doing.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I'm some abnormal in the sense that I love SEO and messing around with all that website stuff, whereas they prefer to do the actual photographing. Let's talk about mindset for a second. This is another big factor, I think, in success. And some photographers seem to allow their own sort of inner fears and insecurities to affect the way they run their business. For example, it affects how they think about pricing and that kind of thing, or maybe affects how they conduct a sales presentation because they have their own inner fears about sales. If they do have these things, what can they do to turn those around into something a bit more positive?
I would say first that let's accept the fact that we're all going to, at some point in our business, have that fear start to overtake us. And I would actually argue, Nigel, that if you don't have that fear that comes over you, there's probably something wrong, or you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. It's something that's totally a reality when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a business owner, and when you're creative. It's fear that's just something that's natural. I'll really quickly just draw a point to Stephen Pressfield, and in his book, he writes, the book is called The War of Art. He says, "Are you paralyzed with fear? That's a good sign. Fear is good. Like self-doubt, fear is an indicator. Fear tells us what we have to do. The more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we are that we have to do it." And I think that's so brilliant, because really what that means is, as soon as you start to feel some apprehension or some fear about doing something, maybe that's sales, maybe that's a creative idea, maybe that's going full-time in your business, whatever it is that we become scared about, that's an indicator that you're so close to the success of that specific idea that it's our subconscious mind putting a stop in the way. It's almost like one last try to stop you from doing it before you achieve that success. So if you look at fear almost as a good thing, where it's like, if you know it's coming, and then you can sense it coming, and then you see it coming, and you're like, wait a minute, this is actually a good thing, because the fact that I'm scared about this means that I'm close to breaking through on something. Let me just push through that fear and break through it, and then I will achieve success, and I'll be able to look back in retrospect and say, so that was definitely a good thing that I pushed through that fear. And so I think if we can approach it that way, Nigel, it probably gives photographers more of permission to say, it's okay to have the fear, look for it, accept it, and push past it.
I'm really glad, because I guess it means I was supposed to do this podcast thing because I was terrified before I started doing this whole thing.
Well, and I think that's like a case in point, right? I mean, anytime, I think any of the listeners that are listening to us right now can probably attest to this. Any great success that we've ever had in our life, maybe it was giving a speech in grade 8, or maybe it was graduating from something, or even applying to a university back when we were younger, whatever it is. Whenever we've achieved great success or had a great breakthrough in our life, I'll bet that if you look at that and backstep a little bit, you'll probably remember a time just before then when you were afraid of doing that specific thing. And I think that's a really good way to approach it, is to say, well, if we're going to be afraid, just accept that it's going to happen, and just accept that we have to push through it and achieve the success on the other side.
I mean, I'm thinking back now to some of the things that I've done in the past, and there is that fear. And again, going back to our friend Chris Brogan, I mean, he talked about the comfort zone that is outside the comfort zone.
Yep.
Not just stepping outside your comfort zone, but stepping outside of that zone and into the completely insane or unknown. And that comes with a certain degree of fear, because that's essentially where the fear comes from, isn't it? It's breaking out of that comfort zone that we live in 99% of the time, and then stepping beyond it to do something different is bound to be frightening on some level.
Absolutely. We become scared of something because we are uncomfortable with it, or we don't know what to expect out of it. And that really, in and of itself, means that we're out of our comfort zone. And that's where the magic happens.
Going back just for a second to some of the fears that people have about asking for money, for example. This is a big one that I hear a lot of, where photographers are, say, well, I feel bad asking for such what I feel is a large amount of money for a session or for these photographs. What can we offer to help them overcome that kind of thing?
I would say, put bluntly, we need to just get over it because this is a thing that we really have to understand. I mean, I totally get it. I speak a ton. I teach a ton. I'm always in communication with photographers, and fear of sales and fear of attaching a price to our precious work and the art that we create is such a hard thing to do because there's that personal attachment to it. And then there's somebody that is then giving us dollars in our hand for that personal work. And it's so hard to do that. But we have to understand that if you want to make a living in photography, well, the sheer idea of making a living from photography means that you have to create photography for money. And so we just have to become okay with it. The other thing that we have to consider, and this is a big breakthrough for a lot of photographers that I talk with, is to say, when somebody inquires with you, when someone calls your studio or sends you an email or sends you a message on Facebook or whatever it is that they're doing, they are asking you, hey, I love your work. I want to hire you to take pictures for X, whatever it is. Can I pay you for it? They're literally asking us, can I pay you for the work? I mean, I don't think anyone assumes that when they inquire with a photography studio that the photographer is going to get back and say, great, I would love to come out and shoot you for free and give you everything. I don't think anyone assumes that. I think that inherently as human beings in the society that we're in, when I call an auto body shop and say I need to get my oil changed, I don't expect them to say, no problem, Bryan, bring the car in whenever you want. We'll switch it out for you. We'll clean your windows and you can walk away scot-free. It's no fee. It's like that doesn't happen. That's not the way that commerce works. And so when somebody inquires with us as photographers, they understand that there's going to be an exchange of money for it. They also understand what it is that you do specifically, and they've obviously connected with it because that's why they're inquiring with you. So get yourself out of the way, Mr. Photographer. I mean, get that fear out of the way, push past it, understand that they are asking you to take their picture. They are asking you they are trusting you. And so we need to simply communicate to them, this is what my time is worth. If you think that what it is that I provide is worth that amount of money, then let's go ahead and continue the conversation. And if not, that's fine. There's other photographers that you can get in touch with that are cheaper than me or that are more expensive than me, whatever it is that you're at. So I think that that's just it, is that we have to understand that when we get that inquiry, there's an assumption that there's going to be an exchange of money for an exchange of services. We need to be okay with that and then just be confident in the way that we talk about our pricing and talk about our services.
So if we understand and know that when someone calls us, there's that implicit, hey, I'm asking you if you can create photographs for me and I know that I'm going to have to pay for them, then it becomes a case of, okay, well now I need to, as a photographer, communicate to you what the value of that photography really is. I don't mean in financial, monetary terms, in dollars and cents. I mean, what is the actual value to you as a person for the work that you want me to create for you, before you then say, oh yeah, sure, okay, it's going to cost you, X dollars for me to do that.
In your experiences, Nigel, with photographers, I'm sure you undoubtedly hear, because I know I hear it all the time as well, photographers saying that, clients are calling their studio, and once they go through this whole discussion about price, the client will always say, oh, well, that's too expensive. I'm sure you run into that often. So I would argue and say that the idea of whether something is expensive or inexpensive is a personal decision. And it basically is the value that you're offering for the price that I am paying. Do they line up, or is one higher or is one lower? And so the case where the price is higher than the value that they're going to be getting from it, that means that the photographer is expensive to that client. In the case where the value you're providing as a photographer is actually so much greater than the price that you charge, well, that actually makes you inexpensive. And that's the place that we need to be. And the true way to get there is to communicate what that value is in a way that builds it up in the client's head, so that once you say the price that's associated with that value you've built up, they say, well, that's actually pretty good. Let's go ahead and book things in. And so that's the really kind of mindset that I love to encourage photographers to get into, is that expensive or inexpensive is just a relative term. And it's all in the minds of our clients, and it's them drawing a relation between the value you've presented and the price that you've given them. So if they're saying you're expensive, well, I would argue to say that you're not expensive. You're just not communicating your value in a way that makes sense for them. And so we need to look at our language and look at the way that we're communicating and really make sure that we're properly describing what that value is that we're giving to our clients.
Right. It would be like me sitting here and just saying to you, well, Mr. Bryan, do you think that $750 is expensive or inexpensive?
Exactly.
You'd be like, well, what do you mean? What's
it depends what I'm getting.
For? Am I getting a new car for that, or a loaf of bread?
Again, these are business fundamentals. I mean, you look at something as simple as I'm standing right now on a standing desk. I've got this desk, and if anyone's ever seen them, it's called Up Desk, and it's got a little remote control that I press, and it's actually electronic where it goes down or up. So I could basically say that and say, I paid $1,200 for this desk. And there might be photographers that are saying, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. That's so this. That's, they might be going in their heads, and maybe they wouldn't be the kind of photographer that would purchase a standing desk. But what I would argue is to say that to me, it's not just a standing desk. It's a statement. It's a health decision. There's so much more value in it than just me being able to stand behind a computer desk. And if you look at it as a piece of wood with two legs that each have a hydraulic in it, $1,200 does seem really high. But if you look at the value that you get out of it and the value that I personally associate to it, $1,200 is a steal. And so I would say the same is true for photography. If we have, a client calling our studio and they don't really care about photography and they're getting married and they kind of just have to check something off the list because they know they have to get a wedding photographer. And if they call your studio and you say, yep, Bryan Caporicci Photography, this is Bryan speaking. And, they ask, well, how much is wedding photography? And you say, well, my wedding photography is $4,000. And they say, okay, thank you. Hang up, click. Well, of course, to them, there's not a great amount of value in wedding photography because they don't appreciate it, they don't value it. And you also haven't really described what it is that you offer that makes it valuable. Whereas instead, if you can walk them through the process of describing what makes you different, what it's like to work with you, why you do what you do, why, all these little intricacies, and then you say, my price is $4,000, well, maybe you've built it up enough for them that it's a good value at that point. Or maybe they're still not the right client for you and they don't value photography enough no matter how much you build it up. In that case, that's fine and they can walk away and they can hire somebody else. But it's just the idea of we have to build up the value before we even start talking about price.
And just to be clear, this creating the value through a conversation with the prospect has nothing to do with trying to manipulate them with crazy ideas or trying to trick them into thinking something or leading them on in a sale or anything like that. It all comes down to being incredibly genuine about the stuff that we talked about at the beginning, which was, why are you in business? Why are you doing this? Do you have a genuine desire to serve this person based on what you believe in, and then the experience that person can expect to have with you? And a lot of people talk about this word experience. It's becoming a bit of a buzzword, I think, actually, which buzzwords always end up losing some of their meaning when they get overused a bit much. But what does that word experience mean for you, and what should photographers do to make sure that what they give to the client as an experience is the one that the clients actually thought they were going to get to begin with?
I totally love the topic of the customer experience because I think that it is such in as much as it has become a buzzword, I think that it's also just as much an under-discussed topic. It's something that there's so much buzz about the fact that you need to provide a great experience, but it's like, what does that actually mean? Like, what does that look like? How do you actually do that? And how can you implement systems in your business in order to give a good customer experience? And so, I've written a ton about this, but I would say sort of as a nice summary is you need to look at every single client interaction, every single client, and almost in a way map out their life with you and with your photography studio. So if we use the example of a wedding client, they're usually inquiring with you, the year before. And obviously before that, they've been doing their research. They've looked at your website. They've probably looked at you online on social media and these kinds of things. And so then they inquire with you. They come in for a consultation or a meet and greet, which is what I like to call it. And then they either book you or they don't. And if they do, then they continue to be your client. There's like an 8-month period where, there's not really much happening. And then you photograph their wedding. And then from there, obviously, you deliver their proofs or you design their album or you get their prints or whatever it is that you do. That's sort of like the client life cycle for one particular wedding client. And we can do the same exercise for every type of photography that we do. So if we're a newborn photographer, we can do the same exercise in terms of what you do as a newborn photographer. But we need to look at that entire life cycle and look at what are the basic expectations for a photographer. And there's sort of 3 areas. 1 would be the product that we offer. 2 would be the service that we offer. And 3 would be the personality that we have and that we bring to the discussion. So if we look at the basic expectations, clients expect good pictures, decent turnaround time, and that we are agreeable. So we're half decent. That's the basic expectations that any client can expect in any photography situation. And if you deliver that, you're going to have satisfied clients. I don't know about you, but I would rather have loyal clients and ecstatic clients than just simply satisfied clients. And so I would then take that a step further and say, when you look at this customer experience, when you look at this client flow, how can you deliver what I call delight at different areas throughout the experience in order to exceed those expectations? So how can you make those good photos be great? How can you make that good service be exceptional? How can you make yourself be just agreeable to be super fun, really professional, and very friendly to them and very personable to them? Those are things that we can do along this whole client life cycle that actually exceed the expectations and create a great customer experience. And I'll back up and say that with all of this, the underlying theme is intention and being purposeful in your photography business, in the sense that these things shouldn't just happen by accident. You shouldn't just, the week before a wedding, decide, hey, I feel like randomly delivering this client flowers because I think that would deliver a great experience and they'd be really happy if I did that. I think that we have to instead be really intentional about what we're doing and map out this client life cycle like I just explained it and say, okay, well, 1 month before every wedding, here's what I want to do. In 1 week after every wedding, here's what I want to do. In 1 week after booking, here's what I want to do. 3 months after the wedding, here's what I want to do. And if you sort of inject these different delight points throughout the customer experience, you're ultimately going to be delivering delight and surprise and exceeding the expectations from your clients. That gives you loyalty, and that means that they're probably going to come back to you. And it also means they're probably going to refer you, and they're going to be happier. Like, I can't think of any downside to any of that.
Me neither. And I think what came to mind to me as you were explaining that is photographers love photography. They love, well, at least I hope they do. They love what they do. They love creating the work. What you're talking about is take that love that you have for photography and create a love for your clients as well.
Exactly. It's all client-centered, and everything that I talk about with relation to the customer experience and even with sales and everything like this, like you interjected earlier with that sort of addition or that sort of disclaimer saying like this isn't about sleazy sales tactics. And I'm really happy you did that, Nigel, because that's something I believe in as well. This isn't about tricking our clients into doing something or doing something with ill intent. It's about being customer centric and about truly delivering great value to them so that they can have the best experience with us.
Yeah, and I think we should do that regardless of how well we are doing in our business too, because nothing smells worse in a sales presentation than a desperate salesperson.
Exactly.
Even if the photographer tries to hide it, like if they are desperate to get that sale because they need the money, it comes through somehow. It leaks all over the place.
Absolutely. And intent has such a strong presence in our communication. And that's where I really like to discuss before we even get into tactics when I teach photographers is to get your mind in the right place first. Appreciate what it is that we do, find value in what it is that we do. Like, I want photographers, and this is something like I practice myself, after every single wedding. My wife is my assistant at weddings. We leave the weddings and we say, we totally over-delivered on what they paid for this wedding. Like, we did such a great job considering the circumstances, considering what happened. Everybody loved us. Everybody was happy. Everyone was having a great time. The images were stellar. Everyone is just stoked, and we've exceeded expectations. Like, I truly want photographers to leave every customer interaction and say, that was exceptional. And when you do it that way, you're coming from the place of proper intent.
It's a bit like dating. People compare business and dating a lot, but in this instance, it's like if you went on a date and the person that you were with, you really felt like, oh man, this person is just awesome. I could spend the rest of my life with this person. You're not going to treat them like, well, just somebody you happen to bump into in the street. You would do your utmost to give them a great experience of being with you.
The picture that I like to paint in this situation is, I think a lot of the time as photographers, we take for granted our clients and we really make assumptions and we almost forget about their importance in our lives. And so if you're in that situation, or maybe you haven't even considered this yet, look at your clients in your photography business. I mean, when I look at my brides and grooms and they're paying me anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for me to be part of their wedding day and to document that experience in their lives, those are the people that are feeding my family. Those are the people that are giving me the opportunities and the luxuries in my life that I enjoy every day. Those are the people that are allowing me to support our lifestyle so that my wife can stay at home with her daughter. These people mean everything to me. And I think when you approach it that way, we can be really humble and we can be really appreciative and genuinely stoked with our clients because they mean so much to us in our business. And I think when we look at it that way, again, it just changes our intent and we approach it from that customer-centric intent instead.
It's like a lot of photographers they consider their photography to be what provides them with their lifestyle, the actual photographs, when really, when you stop and think about what you just said, it isn't just the photography that gives them their lifestyle. It's the people who receive that photography, who asked them and trusted them to create it in the first place.
There are hundreds of thousands of people in this world who love photography and take great pictures. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it gives them the lifestyle to be an entrepreneur and to be a solopreneur and to enjoy the luxuries that some of us can enjoy by being a successful photographer. And so I totally echo those sentiments, Nigel, in that a lot of photographers think it's the photography. And I would say, no, the photography is just what we're offering the clients. It's the clients that give us that luxury.
So I have got a couple of questions left if you have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have 3 tips that you could offer aspiring professional photographers who are just getting started in their business?
Number one, I would say, and this sort of seems to be a running thread in this discussion, be purposeful in everything that you do in your photography business. And I mean, I've said this time and time again. I've written articles just about this. And whenever I get asked that question about, like, what would I do if I could even go back and talk to the photographer that, me 10 years ago, be purposeful in everything that you do. Whether it be in what you create, like what are you creating it for? What are these images for? I think when we look at it that way, it turns us from a just spray and pray photographer to a photographer that's really creating with intent. And so when I say create with purpose, it also applies to all these business ideas that we've talked about today, where it's like, instead of just letting things happen on accident, be purposeful in your photography and in your business. Another tip I would say would be, don't forget to focus on the business side of things. And again, these are another running thread here, but there's so many great resources out there, like your podcast, for example, Nigel, or even your website. I mean, there's so much great content on there, SEO. I mean, there's so many things that we have to consider, so many different hats that we have to wear as photographers that we can't forget about all that. It's not just taking pretty pictures and posting them on Facebook. So, really take a second to step back from the bigger picture, take a step back and look at the bigger picture and appreciate what has to go into it and take the time to really hone your skills there and educate yourself. Number 3, I would say is take your time. Don't rush into things. Don't do it because you see someone down the road doing it, or the biggest mistake that we can fall into as photographers is to start getting things going, and we're sitting there on Facebook or on Twitter and we're seeing our friend who just started and they're posting all kinds of great things, and we're kind of like, we get this jealousy or we get this like anxiety about like, well, why are they doing that and I'm not able to do things the way that they're doing it? You can't judge what other people are doing by looking at what they're putting out there on social media, because that's not a good judgment of what's actually happening in their life, and you also don't know the context of what goes into all that. So don't rush things. Take things one step at a time. Take things slowly. Don't just jump into it. If you want to be a wedding photographer, don't just think that you can, start shooting weddings tomorrow. I mean, there's a process that you probably should become familiar with. There's confidence that you have to build up. There's a technical expertise. There's the whole business side that you have to become familiar with. So take your time with it. We sort of live in this society now where we all want everything so quickly. And I think that that's a detriment to what we can do as professional photographers. I think if we take our time, be purposeful, focus on the business, and don't rush things, then we can really approach business and approach photography and be massively successful on purpose.
Well said. Well, Bryan, we've been talking for about 45 minutes now, so we might have to continue this another time, I think.
We'll have to do a part 2, perhaps.
Absolutely. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of everybody listening to this to say thank you so much for being generous with your time and for being here with us today. This has been a real... It's packed. I mean, I couldn't...
I could probably make pages and pages of notes, and I've been literally scribbling things down as you've been talking. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And hopefully we'll see you on here again sometime.
For sure. Would love to. Always happy to collaborate.